Hello and welcome. In this video, I want to show you how we can create a custom React Toast component. After creating the component, we are just going to create some buttons so that we can try out and display the Toast component. We're just going to be using some HTML and CSS to create the Toast. And then for the functionality, we are going to basically use some hooks like the useState hook, and probably we can use the useEffect hook as well. This is how the page is going to look for testing out or trying out the Toast components. We're going to have these buttons for success, danger, info, and warning. And then this select tag here is going to be for selecting the position. We have the top right, the top left, the bottom right, and the bottom left. So right here, if no position is selected, we are going to set a default position. So when the user clicks on the button without selecting the position, we are going to use the top right basically as the default. So if I click here now without selecting any position, you can see I have the Toast. You can see the Toast here displayed. So I have the success, the danger, the info, and the warning. This is what we are going to build. So if I select another position, top right, it clears what we already have. And now you can see top right here. If I select top left, I can start with this. Now you can see the Toast. Bottom left, right here. And then we can also clear this using the button. So we are going to create this Toast component using React. Now let's get started. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a new page or a new project. So navigate into the directory where you want to create your project. Now I'm going to be using the create React app module. And as you know, you can either use create React app by installing it globally using npm, or if you don't want to use that, you can use npx. And if you already have node and npm installed, then you have npx as well, because npx comes bundled with npm. And then you can just use npx with the create React app command. So that is what I'm going to be using. I'm not going to install the create React app module. Instead, I will use npx. So navigate to the directory where you want to save your project. So for me, I'm going to create the project right here. So I'll run the command npx create -react -app, and then the name of the application, I'll call it React Toast. So you can call it whatever name or Toast, but for me, I'll just call it React Toast. Now, this is going to create the project. It's going to add the dependencies that are required for us to start. We are not going to be adding too many dependencies, like I said. We are going to be using just HTML, CSS to create the Toast component, and then we add some images. Now, I will pause this video and wait for this to get created. So now I have the project created, and what we need to do is navigate into the directory. So cd, then React Toast, and I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. So inside the directory, type code, then dot. It's going to open up the project in VS Code. Now, as usual, when we use the create React app, this is the structure that it creates: the node modules, the public directory, the source. This is where we're going to be working. Then git ignore, package JSON, yarn log. Now we can either use, if you want to install third-party modules, you can either use yarn or you can use npm, or if you want to build as well. So if I go into package.json, this is how it looks. So later we are going to make some changes, but for now we are not going to be installing any module right now. We're going to be using this default dependencies. We are not going to be adding any tests. So to get started with this, let's go into our source. And the way I like to arrange this, my source directory, I like to create a components directory. If I'm using Redux, components, services, I like to create folders or directories for those. We are going to be creating 2 components, and then those components, we will use it alongside with this app component. So first, let me open the terminal and I can run npm start. Now this is going to start the server and then open it up in the browser. So while I wait for this to get started, right here what we just have is just functional components. And if you're using the create React app, the components that are created in the app.json or .js file is usually a functional component. Now you can decide if you are more familiar or more comfortable using class components, you can use class components. But for me, I prefer using the functional components, so that's what I'm going to be using. So now you can see this is how the page looks. This is what we have inside our app.js. So this is a functional component, but instead I will change it to const right here. Okay, so this is what we have. It's still going to work. The page will automatically reload. Now what I want to do, like I said, we're not going to be writing any tests, and this service worker file, we are not going to be interested in it. Probably we can delete it later. But for now, let me create the components directory. So components. We're going to be creating a button component, and also we are going to be creating a toast component. So with this, what we need to do now is to start with the toast component. I will delete everything I have right here. So just remove all this part from here. I'll change this to app. Then this I'll change to a div. This is going to be a div. Then I'll call this app header as well. And then we are going to add our toast components, add our buttons later. I will show you to test out the components. And then let me remove this part. Here you can see we have some CSS. So what is going to happen is, because I won't be typing all the CSS code, it's going to take us so much time. I will just copy and paste the CSS. I've made available the repo for this project, so you can go to the GitHub repo for the project, open up the app.css, copy the style you have there. So I will just copy and paste because it will take us much time. So this is what we have inside the app.css file. We just have this app class, the app header. Then we have the app body, which we are going to add later, the toast buttons, then the select tag, then the CSS for the different buttons. So we're going to be setting a background color for each of the buttons, but we are not going to add those now or at this point. Let me save. And then one other thing, here inside the index.css, I'm going to remove this font family for now. I'll add the font family. Now this is going to be Roboto, and then sans serif. Now this will not be applied because we don't have the font. So go to the browser, search for Google Fonts right here, and let's look for the Roboto font. So let's see. Right, it's selected. I can use this import. Let's copy this part. Then inside the index.css, you can paste this. Now, if you don't want to use this font, you can use any other fonts that you're most comfortable with. But for this, I'll save this for now. Probably later I might change this here from this display swap to something else, but I will just leave it the way it is for now. So copy the CSS code from the app.css in the repo and then paste. If we decide to type all this, it might take us a lot of time, and we still have some CSS to be added inside our toast component. Now, inside our components, let's create a directory. I'll call it toast right here, and I'm going to create another directory. I'm going to call it button. So these are the two components we are going to have. Now in the toast, create two files. The first is going to be toast.js, and as you can see, I'm using the .js extension. I prefer this most than using the JXS, so I will use this. And then the next is going to be toast.css right here. Now let's get started with the toast components. Like I said, we are going to be using functional components. So first, import React from React. Now we need this. Now let's import the toast CSS file. So import the toast.css file. If you don't want to use CSS, you can still use SCSS. And then let's create the function. So I'll call it toast right here. And then the next thing is for us to export this function. So export default toast. Now exporting this as default, wherever you need to use these components, if you want to import, then you import toast from, then you add the path. But if you don't want this, and instead you want it to be like this in brackets, then you don't need to export it as default. Instead you export it as a property right here. So if you export it as a property, this is how you are going to import. But if you export as default, then this is how you are going to import. So if you see imports, either importing it this way, that means it's exported as a default function or property. But if you are importing it with brackets or curly braces, then it's not exported as a default. But I'm going to leave this as a default export property. Now here we need a return. So inside the function we need a return, and I will use brackets. And inside this return function, we need to add a parent element. Usually takes a parent element, and then inside this parent we can add all of the properties that we want. Now if you don't want to use this div as the parent, you can either add import fragments and then set this as a fragment. Now doing it this way, in the DOM, this will not be displayed. This fragment will not be displayed, but I don't really like using fragment. Instead I used empty tags. I use this empty open and close tags. So this is also going to serve as the parent, but in the DOM this will not be displayed. Then right here we need to add the elements that we want. So first I'm going to add a div with a class name. Now I'm going to call the class name notification container. Later here on this element, we are going to add another class, which is going to be the position, and that position we are going to be getting it from the app.js component as a prop, so that we can dynamically set the position, allow the user to select a position where they want the toast to be displayed. But for now, on this div, add this notification container. Then the next is we are going to use another div right here, and this is going to have a class name of notification dash toast or notification, and then another class called toast. So on this, add two classes, notification and another class called toast. We're going to add the position as well later. And then inside, we're going to have a button, we're going to have an image, and we're going to have some tests. So let's start with the button right here. I'm going to probably change this to a button component because I already have it right here. So I will just add this test X. So when the user clicks on this, then the toast will be closed. No class will be added on this. We can use this directly. And then add a div here. This is where we are going to be displaying the image. So we are going to add an image to each toast. Here, image source alt right here. So we're going to add an image here. Then after this div, we need to add another div. Right now, what we are doing is just the notification or the components properties for one toast. Instead, we are going to be using an array. So inside that array, that is where we are going to be pushing the properties that we want. And then we are going to loop through the array to display. So the user can add multiple toasts at the same time or when clicking on a particular button. But for now, let's just create this component. Then after this div, we can add another div, but no class. Here, I will add the title, the message, and the description. I will use p tags. So this will have a class name of notification dash title. I can call this success. Let me duplicate this. This is going to be notification message. This is a success toast component right here. So we are going to have the title, we are going to have the toast, we have also this image tag, and then the button. This is just all we need to do. Like I said, we are going to be using an array. So whenever the user wants to use the toast, it's going to pass it into an array, and we're going to get those properties as props. So for now, I'll save this, go into the toast.css from the repository, copy the CSS code. I won't be able to type all of this at this point because it's going to take us a lot of time. So instead, just like how you did with the app.css, go to the repo, locate the toast.css file, and then copy this code. You can see, let's go through it. I have the notification container. You can see the notification container with just these properties, the font size, box sizing, position, Z index. You can change this if you want. Now, this here represents the position where we want the toast to be displayed. So we have 4 positions. We have the top right, the bottom right, the top left, and the bottom left. And here we just have the properties top right. We have a transition, the animation transition right here. Then bottom right, top left, bottom left right here. So these are the positions. And these are the classes that we are going to send later and then display them here. So what I'm going to do, let me just copy one of these. Let me use bottom right. Just copy this class and then paste it right here. So I'm going to paste it on this component. Like I said, later this is going to be dynamic based on the user's selection. We are going to send this as a prop, but for now we are going to use it as bottom right. Then we have this notification component. You can see with all of these properties, background transition, the position, we have the width, the margin, the maximum height. You can look at all this. Then we are adding some hover property as well. So when we hover on it, we add a box shadow, opacity, and cursor. We want it to be pointer. Then next is the notification title for this p tag right here. So weight, font size, text align, margin top, bottom, width, and height. Then the notification message, which is this second p tag. So right here we have these properties: margin, text, height, margin left. Now we have this overflow, text overflow, and then white space. Now the reason why I added this is in case the notification message is probably way too long, something like this. Now it wouldn't make sense to display all of this at the same time. So what we are going to do is, once this text gets to the end of this p tag, because we've added these properties right here, this overflow, text overflow, and then white space, it's going to just use ... these 3 dots to let the user know that the text is probably still continues, the message still continues. So when it gets to the end of this p tag, because of this property, it's going to just break it using this ... right here. So this is why I added these properties. But if it's not a very long property, then it's going to display the notification message. Then the next is the image. We have this right here. And then the notification image, the image itself, sets the width and the height. And then I have this toast, the notification button, which is this button right here with all these properties. And then for the animations, right, we have the toast in right and the toast in left. So when the toast is displayed, we are adding this transition or this transform x, translate x, both for the toast in right and the toast in left. So this is just the CSS added to this component. Now let me save this. What we need to do is to use this component inside our app.js. So somewhere right here, I'm not going to add it inside this app header. I'll put it down here, because inside this app header, that is where we are going to add the buttons so that we can display the toast. So let me clear this part. Now this is not imported, so I have it imported right now. So what is going to happen is we are going to display the toast for this with the message, but no image right here. Let me just add http://placehold.it/30 or 50 by 50. Let's see how it's going to look, if it's going to work. Then let me save this. Like I said, all of these properties, like the title, the toast, message, the image, the position, they will all be coming as a prop right here. So let's see this. Right now, this is how it looks. We don't have the colors being displayed, so we need to display the color. So to display a color, let's go back to the toast component. Here on this, let's see, on this element, on this div, I'm going to add a style property. So style, so I'm adding an inline style right here, and I'm going to set the background color right here. You can set it to whatever you want. Let me set it to red for now so that we try this out. Now this color is going to be coming as a property inside the array. So set the background color, save this. Now let's go back. Now you can see how it looks. This is where the image we have. If you hover on it, you can see we have a box shadow. So this is the image. This is the title, this is the message or the description, and then this is the cancel button. Now if I duplicate this, let me see. If I duplicate this, just paste this right here. Let me change this to green, blue for now. So save. Now you can see how the toast looks. I'm going to change these colors, but for now we have our toast components here. So now that we have the toast component, what we need to do is, let's try to add the properties or the props. So let me undo this so that we can loop through the arrays. So here inside the components, I'll pass a props property here in the function, and then const. Since this props is going to be an object, we use object destructuring. So I'm going to get the array and the position. So I'll call this toast list right here. This is going to be an array, and then we are going to loop through this array, and then we get the position as well. So whether we want it the way we described it here, top right, top left, or bottom left. And then since this is object destructuring, we get it from props. Like I said, this is an array. Now we need to use the map method. So after this div here, we add curly braces, and then what I'm going to do is, now we have two options. It's either we can just directly loop through this array, or we can create another property. But for testing right now, I will just loop through this array directly. Later we are going to make some other changes. So toast list.map, since this is an array, and if you want to loop through an array, you can use the map method. And then here I'm going to pass in two properties, like the toast, you can call it toast or whatever you want, and also the index right here. Now here, if you are using the map method inside a template, you don't need to add curly braces. Now all we need to do is this part of the div, let's just move it into the map method right here. So this toast list, we are mapping through it. We have the toast property and the index. Now this requires a key, because in React, if you are using the map, you need to pass a key to the property to distinguish the properties. And then remember I said we are going to be using this position. Now let's use it here. You can remove this property. Now copy this notification and then add the curly braces, and inside I will use backticks, paste the notification dash container class, and then after that you add the position using this dollar symbol and the curly braces. So whatever is set here in the position will be added as a class here, and also we need to do the same thing for this class. So copy this part, delete the quotes, add backticks, paste, and then we need to add this property right here as well. So now what I need to do is I'll change this. We are going to be getting the background color. So e dots, or rather toast dot background color. So I'll call the property background color. So whatever is set as this background color will be added right here. And then here I'm going to be having the icon. So this is going to be toast.icon that we want displayed. And then the next properties, this is going to be toast.title. And then here is going to be toast.description, or let's call it description or message or whatever. But for now, we'll just leave it as description. So right here, I'm going to add these props inside my app.js. Now let me save this, or before I save, so that I don't get any error. Now let's pass the properties right here. So as you know, in React, this is one of the ways by which you can pass properties from one component to another. You pass them as props. So I'm going to create a property here. For now, this is just going to be for testing. So const toast props. So this is going to be an array, and then inside I'm going to add some properties. First, I need to generate something like a random ID. So I'll call this ID. I'll use math.floor, and inside this math.floor, math.random, and then I want the random number to be between 1 and probably 100. So you multiply this by 101. So if you want it between 1 and 100, 101, and then I need to add brackets here, and then add another bracket here, and then add plus 1. So this ID is going to be randomized between 1 and 100. So the first property is going to be the ID. Now this is the same thing as ID. The key is ID and the property here is ID, but using shorthand. Then the next is going to be the title. I'll call this success or whatever you want. This is just a title that I'm adding. Then description. I will just say this is a success toast component. Then background color. Here you can set whatever background color you want. Now remember, these properties right here, they correspond with the properties we used, like the background color, the title, the description. But the toast itself is not going to be part of this array. It's going to be a separate property. So background color for the toast, I'm going to be using something like this, 5C B8 5C right here. And then for the icon, now what you're going to do is you can download any icon that you want to use, create a new directory. I'm going to call this directory in my source assets, and then inside this assets you can add all the icons or images you want to use, and then what you need to do is just import it here and then use it inside this object. So I added some icons. You can go ahead, download the icons from the project and then use it right here. So I'll add all the icons. So right here I added all the icons into this asset. We have the check. They are all SVG files. So to use them, you need to import them right here. So I'll say import, and I'll call this check icon. This is going to be for the success toast. Check icon from assets / check.svg, and then I'll just pass this as the property right here. So if you want to use an image or an icon or an asset like this, you have to import it in React. So these are the properties: the ID, the title, the description, the background color, the icon. So let me duplicate this. I'll add this. I'll call this danger. This is a or this is an error, or whatever you want to call it. And now for the color, I'll just change this to D9534F. Now remember, this ID is going to be randomized. Now for this, import error icon from assets / error.svg, and then we just paste it right here. So for now, let's just try out with these two. What you need to do is the name, which is toast list. We are going to use it right here. So toast list is going to be equal to this toast props, and then the position. The position, like I said, this is going to be dynamically added later when the user selects. I can say top left right here. So now I have this. Let me save. Let's try it out. Now you can see we have the success and the error toast. If I change this to top right, save, you can see right here, bottom right, you can see the animation added right here, and then bottom left. So now you can see the toast, they are being displayed. So what if any user uses this component in their application? All they just need to do is pass these props with all of these properties right here. So if they want to display toast, they just need to push this object or an object with all these properties into the array, and then pass the array with this toast list, and then set the position. So whatever is passed right here, as long as all these properties right here are found, then it's going to display the toast. I'm going to show you how we can add the prop types so that we have all the required properties. So now that we are able to display the props, let's create the buttons so that we can trigger this right here. We click on the button, it will display the toast. So I'm going to start off inside this my app component right here. I'm going to move this outside somewhere here for now. Oh no, let me leave this here. I will do something different. Before that, let me create my button component. So let's create a new button component. Inside this button folder, create a new file called button.js. This is just going to be a simple button, and then here, as usual, import React from React, then import prop types. So we are going to be using these prop types. Now create the function, I'll call it button, and this is going to take some properties, and then here export default button. Now let's set the prop types. So button dot prop types. Now the prop types or the properties we are going to pass into this button, like the label, the class name, and the onClick method. So label, this is going to be prop types. This is how you set prop types. Dot string. Now if you want this to be a required field, that every button must contain a label, you just add is required. Then I'll set a class name. This is going to be prop types dot string dot is required. If you want the class name to be a required property, then the other one is HandleClick. So we are going to use this as the onClick method. So prop types dot function. Now I don't want this to be a required field because the buttons might be used without any onClick function. So this is not going to be a required property, but these two will be required properties. So we need to destructure these properties: label, class name, and HandleClick from props. Now let's return this. Add a div. I can add empty anchor tags, and then inside we just add the button. So this is how you create a custom button. Here is going to be the label, and then inside this button, usually where you add the class name and the on-click, I'll set the class name right here to class name, and then I'll set the on-click. So this HandleClick is going to always be a function, and whenever that function is passed on this on-click, when the button is clicked, it's going to be triggered. So this is just all we need to do right here. We set the class name, the HandleClick, and also we set the label. So I'll save this. Now let me use this button inside my app component. Here in the app component, we can go ahead and add multiple buttons. Remember, in the app CSS, we already have these classes: the success, the danger, the info, and the warning. We already have those classes. So all we just need to do is pass them here. First, let me import this. Yeah, auto import. Now I need the class name. This is going to be success for one button. Label, I'll call this success for now. Save this and let's see. Now you can see how the button looks. This is not what we really want for the button. So here I'm going to wrap this button in a div. So div, and this div will contain a class called toast button. So set the class name to toast dash buttons. Let's see, we already have the style. You can see them right here. So now if you want to do for the other properties like danger, info, and success, you have to duplicate this and then change the class name to, let's see what we called, danger, info, and warning. So danger, info right here, warning. Save this. Let's see. Now you can see how the buttons look. Now we just have this right here. I don't really like it displayed this way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a for loop. But before I use the for loop, here before this div, I'll add a p tag, and I'll just add the title React Toast component right here. So inside this app header class, you add this p tag. Save, and now you can see how the toast component looks. Now, like I said, I will use a for loop instead of using this the way it is. Yeah, you can do this, but it doesn't really make much sense. We just need to add the properties into an array and then loop, so we have these components displayed once or used once. So right here at the top, before the class definition, I'll create a property. I'll call it button underscore properties or props, or whatever you want to call it. This is going to be an array of objects. Now I'll add ID 1. Here I'll set the type. I'll set the type to success because we are going to use this later. Then the class name. This is going to be success. And then the label, success. So what I'm doing right here is just basically the properties I have here, the class name, the label, and I added these two new properties, the ID and the type. So what you should do is just create 3 more objects for the danger, the info, and the warning buttons. Add them inside these properties. So I'll pause this video so that I can add those properties. Okay, so here what I did was just add these other properties: ID2 type danger, class name and label, ID3 type info, ID4 type warning. So now we have this. All we need to do is just map through this or loop through this. So I'll delete all this here, and then here I'll add the curly braces, then use the button props.map. Here I can add the property, and then all you need to do is move this button into the map function. And then here we need to add a key. It's required, like I said, if you're using map, you need to set a key. So this is going to be e.id. The e, this is just a property, an instance of every property you have in the array. And then for the class name, this is going to be e.className label, e.label right here. Then later we are going to add the HandleClick property. So I'm going to save this now. Let's go back. You can see we still have the same effect, even though we are just using one component, but we are using it inside a map, and we have 4 of those properties in this button props array. So now we have that out of the way. The next thing is I'm going to create another property, which is the select tag down here. So div, so that the user can select a position, set the class name to select. We already have all this defined. If you come right here, you can see I have the select property. And then inside this div, add the HTML select tag. Now I'm using this. I could decide to create a different component whereby I use divs and also list elements. That will give us the chance to style it whichever way we want. But for this, we can only style as much on the elements because it will take the default styling of the operating system. So inside this, we are going to add some options. So the first option is going to be the select position text, and then I'll add 4 other options. So this is going to be top right, and the value here I'll set it, the value here I'll set it to be the same as what the classes we defined here. So this is going to be top dash right. In fact, let me just delete this other part. So I will just duplicate this. This is top left. This is bottom left, and then bottom right. Right here. And then on this select tag here, we need to add some properties. I'll add the name. I'll call it position, because on this select tag we need to use a value and onChange property. So value, I'm going to leave it as empty. We are going to set the value using the useState hook. Then onChange, I'm going to create this method, and then I'll set a class name that I created. I'll call it position-select right here. So we need to add this onChange method. I'll call this select position. This is just a function and it needs to be created. So I'm going to create it here. Const select position right here. Now the value is empty, so we are going to add that later. So let's try to see how it looks. Save. And now you can see how it looks. So if the user selects, now nothing is going to be displayed because the value property is empty or an empty string. So if the user selects top right, then we are going to pass that property here. If the user's whatever position is selected, that is what is going to be passed as the position in the toast component. Now we have that part. What we need to do is create this HandleClick right here. Where is the yeah, this button. So I'm going to create the HandleClick property. So go to the button, this HandleClick, and I'll call the function showToast. So let me create another function. I'll call it showToast. Now this is going to take a type. It's going to take a property. I'll call it type right here. So pass this. You can add it as a function as well. And then here you can pass e.type as the property. Remember, we already set the properties right here. So the success, the danger. Now the reason why I added this type property is so that we can know which particular button was clicked, and we are going to use that inside the JavaScript switch. You can either use if, else if, but I will just use the switch statement. Now what I'm doing right here is just for us to test this toast. We already have our toast component. You can see right here. You can use this and display it whichever way you want. Now these other properties or functionality I'm adding is just for us to try out and see that the toast component is actually working when we click on a button. But here you can see we have our toast component. So that is why I would be using the switch statement. So now I'm going to use the useState. So right here, import useState. Now for this useState, we'll need to add some properties. The first property we are going to add, let me add them here. Const, I'll call it list, and then this is going to be set list. This is going to be an array. Right now we are just directly using these toast props. That is why we have this displayed. So instead, when a button is clicked, we are going to push the object into this array, this set list array, and then this set list array or this list, that is what we are going to pass here. So now this list, I will just move it here. So move it here. This is going to be an array. Whenever we set or whatever is added to this set list method as an object into the array, that is what is going to be passed into this list. And then I'll create another property called position. Const position, set position. Now here you can either set your default position here, which is bottom right, but I don't want to do that. I'll leave this as empty. Instead, in my toast component, I'll create some props and add a default prop as well. So I'm going to leave this as an empty property. And then here, the position, I'll pass it as a property right here. Then for the value, for this value property, on the select tag, set the position. So what this is going to do, whatever is selected inside this prop, we are going to use this set position method to set it, and it's going to be equal to this position property. So if we select top right, then this position property will be equal to top right, and that is what we are going to display as a value here and pass as a position prop here as well. Now let's go into the show or select position. First, we need to set the position. Let's add this event so that we can get the property. From this select tag, because we have this value property, we can easily get the value from the event.target. So set position, this is going to be e or event.target value. So what I'm doing right here is setting the position. Whatever the user selects from these options, we are setting it with this set position, and the value is going to be set here with this variable. And then another thing is this set list. I'll set it to an empty array. Now, why I'm setting this to an empty array, if the user selects, we want to clear the toast. So if the user selects a new position, we want to clear the toast so that once a button is clicked, they will be displayed on the new position. So set this to empty. Now we have the position set. Inside our toast or show toast method, right here, I'm not going to be needing this, but before, let me move this right here into this show toast, and then I'm going to use the switch like I said, set the type, and we're going to have 4 different cases. So the first case is going to be success. Remember, we have the types right here, so the success, the danger, the info, and the warning types. So when we have the first case here, I'm going to create another property. I'll call it toast object toast property. I'll set it equal to null. So right here. So when we have this first case or the success case right here, then toast properties will be equal to this object. So I just need to copy this, paste right here, and then add the break. Let me see why I'm getting all this. Okay, I need to add the default case. So let me add the default case. Default. So the default is just going to be an empty array. Set list right here. Then the second case, which is going to be danger. I can copy this right here. The ID is still going to be the same, but the properties, I can remove this right here. Then the third case, this is going to be info. Yep. This are not aligned properly. Info. So the title is going to be info. This is an info toast component. Now for the color, I will change this to 5BC0DE. And then lastly, we need to make a change for the icon as well. So this is going to be warning. I'll change this to warning. So this is a warning toast component. For the color, F0A D4E right here. Now before we continue, let's change these icons. So import, let's see, the info and the warning. So I'll call this info icon from assets /info.svg, then import warning icon from assets /warning.svg. Now you just need to pass these properties here. So this is going to be info icon, and this is going to be warning icon. Now we are getting these yellow squiggly lines because this property is not used yet, and also we need to change this to let. So let's change this to let, and now we don't need these 2 properties here, so delete right here. Now we've changed this to let, and now this is not used. So to use this is very simple. outside of the switch statements, we just need to set this toast right here. So outside the switch, because this is an array, we need to use the array destructuring to pass this object. So whatever is selected here as the property, toast properties, we need to add it using array destructuring and pass it into the array. So I'll say set list, and then here I'll pass square brackets, and inside the array we use the array destructuring with the spread operator, which is this. We pass the previous state. So if you want to pass new properties into an array or into an object, you need to set or pass first the previous values or the previous state. Now the previous state for this is an empty array, so we need to pass that first, and then we need to pass in the new property, which is now toast properties. So this is just all we need to do. Now if you just pass only this toast property without passing the previous state, then this will not be updated the way we want it to be updated. But if you use this spread operator, so we are using the structuring to pass in the previous properties. So if, for example, we set default values here as an example, we set default values into this array. So these properties will first be destructured or added into the array, and then this new property will replace the specific property already in the object or in the array. So but in this case now, our array is an empty array. We still need to destructure. So this is just how we update this set list, because we are going to be updating this every time a button is clicked. So we need to add the new properties. Like I said, if you don't add this right here, it's not going to always update with the new properties. So this is just all we need to do right here. So we create these different cases, set the properties with ID, description, title, background color, and the icon, and set a default, which is an empty array, and then we pass in the new properties. Now before we test this out, let's go into our toast component. In the toast, what I want to do is we need a way to detect when a new property is coming in to this array. So I'm going to use the useState as well, useState hook, and also useEffect. So with this useEffect, we are going to be using it to re-render whenever a new property is sent. So first, let me set the new state properties. I'm going to call this list, set list as well. This doesn't have effect to this set list we have here because they're different components. So useState, and the default for this is going to be this property, whatever we have in this array. Since this is an array, so we are going to set the default property. And here, instead of using this toast list, I'm going to just use this list array. And then the next is useEffect. I'm using this useEffect because I want React to re-render and display the new components whenever a new value is sent. And I'm going to do that using this new or this set list, and then I'll pass toast list. And then this useEffect, it takes in this array, which is a dependency array. Now the properties that you want the useEffect hook to watch for changes, you need to pass them into this array. So I want it to watch the toast list and also the list array. So I want these properties. So whenever there is a change or new array comes in, we are setting it with this set list and using it right here. Now I'm doing this so that when we add the delete functionality, it's going to be easier for us. When the user clicks, we can easily delete or remove a property from the array. But right now, using this useEffect, we are setting the list, and then we are watching for changes for this toast list and this list properties. So now I'm going to save this. Let's go to the browser. Now you can see nothing is displayed. If I select a position, let's try this out. Now you can see it's displayed at the top right. Now if I select a new position, this should clear the toast. This is because here you can see here we are setting the array to an empty array using this setList method inside our app component. So whenever a new position is selected, we clear the array. So you can see right here, if I select bottom left, you can see the toasts, they are being displayed. Bottom right, right here. So now we are able to control or display our toast components by selecting the position, and then also we click on the button. But right now, if I reload, if I click, nothing happens. Right here you can see, if I select the position, you can see nothing happens until I click. Now we need to set a default position. So the default position, I'm going to be using the props. So go to your toast components, import props or the prop types. So import prop types. From right here, prop dash types. And now the props that we're expecting are this toast list and this position. So the idea for this is we want the toast list to be a required field. So prop types. So toast list, let me just copy this. Now this is going to be an array. Prop types dot array dot is required. Now this is just basically for some validation, so that any developer that is using this component inside this application will always pass this toast list as a required property. And then the position is going to be optional, because the user might just decide to, before selecting a position, the user might click on a button. So we want to set a default position, and the position is not going to be a required field because it's going to have a default property. But this is going to be prop types dot string. And now to set the default, all we just need is toast dot default props, and this is only going to be for the position. And you can set the position. For me, I will set it to bottom right. So if the user clicks the button before selecting a position, the position is going to take this default, which is bottom right, right here. So let me save this now, and then let's try. You can see the default position. Previously, before we added these props, when the user clicks on the button before selecting, nothing was displayed. But right now, with these default props, even if the user does not select, let me reload, we're going to display the props. You can set this to whatever position you want. And then one other thing we need to do is to be able to delete a toast. Right now we can't delete. So what we want to do, we already have this button. We just need to delete this or remove this from the array. So to achieve that, it's very simple. On this button, now you can decide to use this button component right here. But if you are going to be using this in a probably separate, or you want to create this in a different application, probably you might leave it here, or you can still create your button component and then use it. But for me, I think I will just leave this component right here. I will use this the way it is. So on click, and here I'm going to create a method. I'll call it delete toast. Delete toast. Now this is going to take the ID of the toast we want to delete. So here I'll pass it as a function. So delete toast. And remember, we already have the ID. We are sending the ID from the app components. Yeah, you can see this ID. And remember, this ID is randomly generated ID. So I'll just pass e.id right here, or rather toast, sorry. This is going to be toast.id, and that is the ID that we are going to use to remove the object from this array. Remember, this is an array right here, and the array is passed here, so we're going to remove it from either this toast list or this list. So to do that, we are going to use the splice and the find index. So I will do that all on one line. What you can do is you can either get the index of the particular object you want to remove and then pass it into the splice method, but I want to do that on one line. So list, because this is the array right here, and then list.splice. This is just JavaScript splice. So it takes a start number and a delete count, so the number of properties or elements we want to remove. So this is just going to be the index, so removes elements from an array, and if necessary inserts new elements, but we are not inserting, rather we want to remove. So inside the splice, I'll pass list.findIndex. These are just JavaScript methods. So I want to find the index of the object using the ID. So this is going to be E, or whatever property you want to call it. Use this fat arrow. So every object where the ID is equal to the ID that we are passing in, we want to return the index of that object, and then we want to remove one property. Remember splice right here. Splice takes in the start number or the index of the element you want to remove, and then this is just the number of elements you want to remove, which is 1. Now you can either do this or const index, and then you pass in the index. So whichever way it still works. First you get the index of the element you want to remove using the ID, and then you pass it into the splice method, and the splice method takes in the start number or the index and then the number of elements you want to remove. Now once we remove that, let me do a console.log with list. So save this. I'm going to open the console right here. Now let me click on this. You can see we have only 3 elements, 2, 1. The array is empty, but now nothing is happening right here. The reason is because we are not setting the list. We need to set this list so that it will update this list array right here. So down here I'll just call set list, and then all we need to do is use the array destructuring. So whatever properties we have inside this array, we use the array destructuring to pass this. Now if you don't want to do this, another thing you could do is list.map. I'm just showing you, but I will instead use this line. But another thing you could do if you don't want to use this destructuring is to map through this. So this is all you just need, set list, and then you pass in the list, something like this. But I'm not doing this. Rather I will use this destructuring. So if we have 3 objects inside the array, then it's going to destructure the array, pass all the properties into this new array, and then this list property will be updated. If we have 2, just like that, until everything is cleared. So if I go back now, let me just display all this. Now click, you can see now the array or the toast, they are being cleared. So now you can see we are able to remove properties from the array or delete a toast using the find index and the splice, and then we are updating the list array. So right here, display the toast, and then I can delete this right here. Select a different position, right here. So right now we have the toast components, and we have these buttons to be able to display the toast. But what is most important is the components. So with this now, if you have your own application and you want to use a toast, what you can do is just use the code you have right here. You can use everything you have right here, even with the CSS. And if you need probably to make a slight change, you can make a slight change. And then these properties, to use these toast components, these properties must be passed the same way we pass them right here. The toast list, which is an array, and the position. So with this, or maybe you could use it somewhere where whenever there's an error, you can just pass it directly into the toast component or create an array. You can reuse these components whichever way you want. So this method right here is just for us to display the toast. But like I said, the most important part is creating the components, which we have created right here. So we can display the toast, we can delete toast. If I change this here, we can delete as well. We can add toast here. So this is how you can create toast components. Now I tried my best to make this as easy as possible. There are some tutorials you might check or some codes on GitHub, and you see it's creating toast components. They are a bit complicated. Now I tried to make this very easy for us all to understand. Like I said, you can reuse this component in your own project. Just copy this code and then also this CSS style. And I also have showed you how you can use this toast component. So this is the end of this lecture. You can go ahead and have access or get access to the codes. The link is added to the description. That is the link to the GitHub repository is added to the description of this video. So you can get access to the files. You can clone the project if you want, and you can use the code whichever way you want. So thank you for watching. And also, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more tutorials on React and other technologies like Angular as well.